Hello and welcome to the Azure Stack HCI Show. Long time ago, so we had a long vacation break and now we are back. Hello, Manfred. How are you doing? I heard
Hello,
you are
Sven.
not feeling so good.
Yeah, but it's getting better, so
It's getting
I'm
better.
fine for the show. I'm looking forward to our first show after the long season break, holiday break, and with our topics today.
Yeah, our topic of today is the release 2408 of Azure Stack HCI. So what is 2408? So usually the Azure Stack HCI versions are called 22H2, 23H2. Now we have 2408. So Azure Stack HCI has annual big new releases. These new releases have to be updated in a time frame of, I think it's 6 months roundabout. But in between, there are some smaller updates on Azure Stack HCI, and these are called the year, so 24, and then the month, so it's August 08. And a lot of new functionalities are coming to Azure Stack HCI. And it's good to see that new features are not coming to Azure Stack HCI only every year, but quarterly or maybe sometimes on a monthly basis to make the product agile and as modern as possible.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I didn't
Manfred, you
find
told
any.
me, yeah,
Yeah,
sorry.
I didn't find any information about this, if these updates with the year and the month, if they are on a quarterly basis or monthly basis. When we look at the time frame since the release of Azure
Mhm.
Stack HCI 23H2, then we can see we didn't see them every month, but we have them on a nearly regular basis. So we had several updates already in February. These were mainly bug fixes. But then we had a major update already in March, April. We had a larger upgrade in May, and now the August update,
Yeah.
where I initially thought maybe these are mainly cloud-based features, but as we will see later in this session, we also have new functionalities for the on-premises components. So we have still the Azure Stack HCI operating system version 23H2, but we have new capabilities added to this operating system. So this is, as you mentioned, a great thing to know that we don't have to wait for this next release, maybe Azure Stack HCI 24H2 or whatever the name will be. We also get regular updates in between. We have seen this in the past, and we will see this with this update also, yeah.
Okay, and it looks like that 2408 has a lot of new features that it's relevant enough to talk about in the Azure Stack HCI show. So I'm curious what you prepared for today. And I guess it makes sense to share your screen.
Yeah, absolutely. Maybe we will first look at the documentation about this, what we talked about. So we had this topic already in one of the previous shows where I think we talked about the 2405 release, where we already mentioned that we have these releases in between. So all those releases are based on the Azure Stack HCI OS we are currently using, so the Azure Stack HCI 23H2 version, but we have several updates for them. These updates include bug fixes, but also feature extensions. And some of these feature extensions are, let's say, public, so ready for production, and some of them are in preview. So I will show a feature in a few minutes that is still in preview, but for me, it's very, very helpful. So I think it's very important that we have a look on it. So one point we will also cover today is this upgrade from version 2020 H2 to 23 H2. So the upgrade process is now officially defined. We have some update changes. We have extensions or changes in the Arc VM management. So this is mainly cloud-based. You also can have a look at this extended feature set. And what's not written in the documentation, or I didn't find an explicit section about this, we have a new ISO file for download. And this was asked for a long time, because when you installed Azure Stack HCI in the last weeks, you still downloaded the initial release version, and you had a huge update package that was downloaded in the deployment process. And when we now go to the Azure portal and we say we want to download Azure Stack HCI, then we have English as preferred language for sure. And when we download the Azure Stack HCI operating system, we can decide if we want to download the English version. This is currently the version 2308 that is downloaded here. We have an English virtual hard disk file. If you read through the documentation, it's recommended for testing purpose in virtual machines. And we have an English preview. This is not brand new, but relatively new, that every customer has access to some preview versions if he wants to test functionalities, what's coming in the next 24.0 something release. And this is wrong here. It's not 2308, it's 2408. It's the year and the month. So currently, we don't know what's the next one, if it's 2409, 010, 11, but there will be a next release like this. And what will come to this release, we can already see in some areas in this English preview version here. And if you
That's interesting. I have a question about that. I remember that with the launch of 23H2, the blog post said that we will not offer a preview version of the next release of Azure Stack HCI for, I don't know for how long. So now there's a preview version of 24H2 existing?
I would not say that this is 24H2. This is some of this next minor updates. So there's no documentation about this. So I could pick this version, I could do my testing, could pull my decisions out of it.
Yeah.
But I would not say that is something related to 24H2, but I don't know it. The interesting thing is that this statement you mentioned said that they are currently not publishing preview versions because Microsoft is focusing on upgrade and things like this. And these topics are now, let's say, in progress. So we know how the upgrade will work for most scenarios and so on. So for me, it seems like that now they are already working on the next versions. My impression is that this preview that is provided here is more one of these sub versions. So something like the 2408 and maybe the 24XY, so the next 24 something version, and not 24H2.
Okay.
But I really don't know it. There's no detailed documentation what is in there. When we download here, we receive a new ISO file, and this is exactly this one here. This is now called Azure Stack HCI 23H2, and then some version number, and now the important point here, 2408. And this ISO file can be used for new installations. So advantages that we have some of the new capabilities in there. We will talk about this. For example, Hyper-V is now activated by default. So this is no extra step within the deployment to activate Hyper-V. It's already enabled. We have all the updates and patches in there. And when we compare it to the initial version, which was this one here, so this was the initial Azure Stack HCI version we used the last month. And this version here, now you can see the file is larger. So we now have something like 500 megabytes more. We have all the updates in there, and we save a lot of time in the deployment process here. Okay, so this is what we have when we are using the installation media. I cannot say how far the progress at the OEMs is, if they already deliver this new version, if they have an integrated system or some pre-installed Azure Stack HCI, or if they still use the previous version. Both versions work for new deployments. This is my experience. I tested both in the last days because I had some presentations to prepare, and this worked with both of them. When we install a new Azure Stack HCI node, and I did this based on a virtual machine, so I created a virtual machine for us. Azure Stack HCI operating system is already running in there. And what I did, I changed the computer name. This is what I did manually via the sconfig wizard. And I changed the network settings so that this machine fits into my environment. And in the past, we had the situation that now we would have chosen step 15, exit to command line. And then we had a lot of steps. We talked about these steps here for the deployment. So first we had to download some module extensions. Then we had to download the Arc agent and configure extensions and so on. So many manual steps. Now we have a different approach. This is in preview, but this is the future. So when I use the web browser and I open the page of this machine here, it's 172.19.205.101. Then I receive a log-on screen, and this log-on screen is from my local machine. So I'm using the administrator here. This is an account on this machine, and I have a password specified within the OS installation. Then I can see this is my machine, D205 ASHCI01, just some serial number here. And now I can start to set up the Arc agent. I do not any more PowerShell here or scripts I have to manually configure. I just click on Start. And now it says, okay, I found a machine. This has one network port. Allocation of IP address is static. This is the IP address, the subnet, the gateway. I can check if this is fine and could edit the values, but these values are fine for me. I can enter additional details. So I could, for example, define that remote desktop should be on by default. In the deployment process, remote desktop on the machine is disabled by default. Many customers prefer to use a remote desktop connectivity. I could configure this here. Then some customers are using proxy servers. I don't like proxy servers because this is always a lot of stress to configure these things. But if you have a proxy server, you can select it here. You can specify the time server, and you could change the host name. I already did this before. And now when I go to the next step, it comes to the Arc agent setup. And the Arc agent setup is really a very easy process because now we can go to the Azure portal and we could say, okay, let's see what the required steps are. I will need a resource group. Let's create a new resource group. This is done via the Azure portal. This is currently not possible from this wizard here. From, let's say, a technical perspective, this wizard could be updated in a form that I also can create the resource group here. But today the situation is that I have to connect to the Azure portal, and here I can create the resource group. Let's create one, the resource group Azure Stack HCI 2005. I will create this in West Europe, this resource group. And let's create this resource group. Now we have to search for the resource group. Here we have the information for this resource group. I have a name I will copy this name and paste this name into this form here. I have a region, it's West Europe. Then we need a subscription ID. This was shown here. I can directly pick it from the resource group, paste it here. And then we still need a tenant ID. The tenant ID is found in the Azure portal. We go to the Azure portal and to their Entra ID. Then I have the tenant ID, and I can also paste the tenant ID here. So very easy copy and paste. And when we compare it to the initial deployment process, so when we go to the documentation and go to deploy, and then here the register with Arc, and here we have the VIA console, then maybe you remember, maybe you did it on your own, or you have it seen in a session here. We had these manual steps here. We had to define the variables. We had to connect to Azure. We had to invoke the subscription and so on. And all these steps are now done via this local UI. So this is already documented, but it's still in preview. So for me, it worked very fine. I already did several deployments with this local UI because it saves so much time. But it's your decision if you do it in the field or not. We have also the prerequisites defined. So what I did already the Active Directory preparation. I downloaded the ISO, I installed the software. I also already did this resource provider registrations. This is all only required once in an Azure subscription. So if you register your first Azure Stack HCI cluster, or before you register your first Azure Stack HCI cluster or node, you will need to register these resource providers. So this is only a node if you do it the very first time. I created the resource group, and I checked the subscription ID and so on. We copied this. We are not using an Arc gateway. I think we already had this topic here. Arc gateway is a new capability to connect to Azure to, let's say, bundle the traffic towards Azure to reduce the connections to Azure. I'm not using this here in this demonstration. And now it's important to ensure that the resource group we are using has the Azure Connected Machine onboarding and the Azure Connected Machine resource administrator. We can easily check this in the Azure portal. So I should be the resource group owner. So I should have the required access rights here. If you want to be sure, or if you are not the resource group owner, you can go to your resource group and you can select the resource group you are planning to use for the deployment. And then we can use the access control and access control IAM, and we can add these role assignments. This is exactly what is written in the documentation. And the first one is Azure Connected Machine Onboarding. This is this role here, Azure Connected Machine Onboarding. I can select the members. I will add my user here to this member list and assign them. And there's a second role, the Azure Connected Machine Resource Administrator. This also has to be done manually. So if you don't have this required access rights, then you have to configure them here. This is not done by the wizard. We will continue in a minute. So then we have the machine resource administrator. This is the second role. And I will again add my user. And configure this here. So, and then we can start with the deployment itself. When you have a physical system and you don't have any access to this machine, then the machine can be addressed via the serial number. So the default host name for the machine is the serial number of the physical system. So I have all the information here: subscription ID, tenant ID, region, and the resource group name. And now I can go to next. I have a review section, and via finish, the deployment starts. And these are 3 clicks and 4 or 5 values I have to copy via copy and paste. And the whole rest is done based on this new deployment wizard. So if we have a look at this resource group in a few minutes, we will see that the server is registered here. And for the servers, the extensions are installed. This still needs some time. I think there was an information about 15 minutes. This also may take 20 or 30 minutes on each machine, but it works automatically. So I don't have to add any additional values here, and I don't have to work through the whole process. One important thing, now we are at the point that we have to authenticate, because for sure, if the system wants to register in Azure, we have to ensure that we are allowed to do this. So I will open the device login section. I will copy the code here, and also very easy from the workflow. So the code is validated. I have to use my account, confirm that I want to log into Azure CLI. And I have already a browser session here on this machine. If this would have been a new one, for sure, I have to confirm my multi-factor information here. And now this continues. So the R configuration is done here. The remote desktop web proxy time server host name is already functional here. What did not work for me was this open in Azure portal. So something is wrong on this link here, but for sure we can open it manually here and check the status in Azure. Here now we have this machine already registered. So this is my server that is registered in Azure. When I click on this server, I will see the extensions. If you have already done it before, you might know that we have 4 extensions here that will be installed via this onboarding process. And here in the extensions area, we can monitor the progress. So currently there's no extension here. So let's see in a few seconds, and then we will see how the extensions come in here. So a great step forward from my point of view, because it looks now like a final solution for the deployment and not a collection of scripts we have to execute. So the scripts worked fine, so there were no issues with this onboarding scripts. But my expectation, and also expectation of many customers, is that if it's a system from Microsoft, then there should be some wizard to do this. There should be some graphical interface. And now we have this interface with this local UI-based deployment. This is the name for it in the documentation.
Sounds good. So
yes,
what feedback do you get from the field at the moment about how stable the installation process of Azure Stack HCI is? Because very often in the past I get questions if we have similar experience that deployment does not work at the first beginning of the first try, so they have to retry. They get in contact with Microsoft experts. No one exactly knows what the issue is. Then they did again, and then it worked, and no one knows why it worked at the second try, but not the first one. So what is your experience at the moment? Does it get better?
So what you described, I also heard very often. But But I didn't share this experience because I did a lot of deployments where I took a lot of learning out of it. And so I had usually I had successful deployments. So I had really some testing in the past days with a validated node, and with the validated nodes, we have to know that we have to talk to the OEM. So we don't have the guarantee to get a complete driver package, and we don't have the guarantee that every configuration is documented. So the validated node is more or less the solution for somebody who has the experience to do it on his own. And on this solution, I can confirm I needed 3 tries for a successful deployment. But what is better in the current deployments, from my point of view, is that the error messages describe very detailed what the problem is. So in my specific situation, I had the situation that I ordered this system as an Azure Stack HCI validated node, but the secure boot was not enabled by default. Yeah, my expectation is if it's an Azure Stack HCI node, I don't have to check these options. But secure boot was not enabled by default. And within the deployment, I received an error message that explicitly said, you have a problem with the system configuration. Secure boot is not enabled. So it's a huge text because I have the full error log in there. But if I was reading through this text, I could see, okay, secure boot is not enabled. So I could reboot my server, I could change to secure boot, and then I could continue the deployment. And the next problem I had was that the network card driver was not supported. So, and this is what I mentioned, it was a validated node. So I have to ask the OEM, which network card driver should I use? Which driver did you test? And for sure, I didn't ask. I only took a driver. But when I received this as error message, and this is what I mean, what went better, because in the past, you had an error message, typical, it was a failure 200, and you didn't know what the issue was when you deployed in February, March, or something like this. Today, my experience is that you have a very detailed error message, and I could solve nearly every deployment issue that was related to drivers, to configurations, or things like this, in reading through this error message and fixing what was written there. So I updated the network driver, and then I could successfully deploy exactly on this validated node machine. So my experience, very good, and it's even getting better. So we have a comment about this in the chat from Toby. He says he had also 3 stacks deployed in a testing environment. He had errors. Yeah, but he confirms also he had error messages, and they were helpful. This is what I mentioned. And he said, interesting is what one stack completely deployed. And then he had problems that the stack had a minus in there or a dash in there. There were issues, and then he deployed completely. So the naming conventions are a little bit difficult. We have different sections where Microsoft explicitly says in the guides that the passwords and the naming conventions follow the Azure requirements. But in some areas, this is not written. But my recommendation is every object we are creating, virtual machines, resource groups, accounts, and so on, always think about the Azure naming conventions, because it's a hybrid solution. So it always can happen that some metadata is stored somewhere in Azure where we have to ensure not to run in conflict here. Yeah. So my extensions are visible now. So maybe we can have another look onto my screen. This is what I mentioned. This is exactly the view on the list that was empty before. And now we have the 3 extensions. 4 extensions. All extensions are creating currently. And we have here the edge telemetry and diagnostics, the remote support, the device management and the lifecycle manager. Usually the lifecycle manager is the component that needs the most time, or takes the longest time to get finished. So important is that these extensions are all completely installed before we continue with the deployment.
Cool. Yeah, there's an advice from Udo Walberer from Lenovo. So maybe that's helpful. And yeah, of course, it makes sense always to have a good connection to your hardware vendor, because they know best what works and what does not work on their hardware, and they can support you in any kind of deployment issues.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So it was not my idea to say that the validated nodes do not work or something like this. For sure, if you know which components to take and which drivers to take, then they work perfectly. And as I mentioned, also my deployment on the validated node system was successful at the end. Yeah.
Yeah, one more comment.
Robert had also a lot of nested deployments. My major issue fails were with network ATC, step with Hyper-V VMs, but by splitting up management compute storage to 2 intents, it seems to work more reliable. So for me, both works. So I'm also doing a lot of trainings and testing with virtual machines, because it's much faster to deploy them. We don't have this boot process and so on. The important to know is that the deployment wizard recognizes if it's a virtual machine. So the deployment is different in some points. So for example, the trusted platform module is not mandatory for virtual machines. I don't know if this virtual hard disk file we can download from the Azure portal, if this file has additional optimizations, or if this is only a pre-configured virtual hard disk file. So I don't know this, but I know that the virtual machines are in some points different in the deployment. And for me, Robert, to your question, both worked to have a single intent for all the traffic, or to split it up in management, compute, and storage.
One more question or comment about the updating to 2408.
I had some trouble updating to 2408. In my case, the net intent from my switchless storage gets failed. I mainly use the 2408 version for new installations since it's released. I cannot say anything about this if they are known. So we could look in the known issues list if there's something in there for the 2408 version for the upgrade, but I didn't have any feedback about this till now. Yeah, and Udo has a good comment. Follow the guide, and it will work usually. So the deployment guide really works very, very well. So when we have preview things, then maybe sometimes not everything is documented. So when we look at the deployment of Azure Stack HCI 3H2, what I've shown to you, let's have another look on this documentation and the deployment here. And then the register the server with Arc, and here via console. This is the documentation for production. Via local UI is preview, and when I scroll down, then I have the situation that the document ends here somewhere at, I have the device code, something is success, and I have the information about the extensions, and then this document ends here. And when we look in the deployment via console, we can read that we need some additional permissions. So they are missing in this part, deployment via local UI, but this is still preview. So for me, I know that I need to configure this, and these are additional things here. We need the Azure Stack HCI administrator and reader role, and on the resource group, we need the Key Vault data administrator, the Key Vault secrets officer, the contributor, and the storage account contributor. This is also not done automatically via the local UI deployment. I'm pretty sure that this will be added, or it's a preview. Maybe this wizard will be extended so that this wizard configures this required role somehow automatically. But this is important if you test it, that you know that these steps are still required additionally. Okay, now we can see 3 of my 4 extensions are already succeeded. As I mentioned, the lifecycle manager needs a little bit longer. It's still creating. And when this is finished, we can go to the Azure Stack HCI and start the deployment. We have seen this deployment already in one of the previous shows. I would say it was one of the first shows based on Azure Stack HCI 23H2. The cloud-based deployment, and these steps are absolutely identical to what we have seen there. Okay, so any comments or questions about this local UI deployment here?
Does not look like that there are additional questions, so I think we can switch to the upgrade.
Yeah, maybe a few minutes. Let's spend a few minutes about this ARC management part in the portal, and then come to the upgrade. Okay. Because what we have seen in the list, there are some ARC extensions, and I have one cluster deployed here. This cluster here, when we look, this is a very small machine. This is, again, I think important information that also small implementations are possible. This is a server with only 4 cores. When I look at the nodes, this is a single node configuration. This is only 1 server. This is possible with Azure Stack HCI. This works perfectly. I have all the capabilities on there. And what is not really related to this 24.08 version, but what is new, what happened new in the time where we were in our summer break, we now have in this area of the resources some additional components. We already know about the VM images. There we have 12 additional images we can download now. This is new. So when I go to the images from the Azure Marketplace and I want to download images here, then we will see now we also have images with SQL Server. So SQL Server, Enterprise, and Standard on Windows Server. We have additional Windows 11 images for Azure Virtual Desktop. So the multi-session images. We have updated Windows Server images. So this image list was extended. Then we have the situation that we have now not only the logical networks, but we have also a list of VM network interfaces. So here I can see my interfaces. I have configured the virtual machines and the related IP addresses. So this is also a resource in Azure. And I have a centralized view on all the used IP addresses. So I can see, okay, 11, 12, 13, 14 is already used out of my pool. And we have a similar view when we go to the logical networks. Here I have only 1 logical network. And this logical network, when I check, I see the area, so the IP address pool section here. I have in the settings the connected devices. This is also relatively new, that I can see which devices, which of my virtual machines use which IP resources out of this logical network here. And this is again one of these cloud-based deployments where we have extensions here that came in. So I didn't read a huge announcement about this, that now we have the new network capabilities here. They were just here with some update in the Azure portal. And when we create logical networks, now the algorithm behind it is more intelligent. So it checks if the IP address space is already used, or if the IP address space overlaps and things like this. Okay.
There's one more question.
Yeah.
About the update to 2408 in a nested HCI, and yeah, sometimes Windows Admin Center is not connecting.
Yeah, I assume the
Is it
question.
because it's a nested virtualization, or is there any different issue?
Yeah. Nadim, maybe you can confirm if you are asking about this. So I will go to the Windows Admin Center here in the Azure portal. And Windows Admin Center is here. This is already installed on this environment. I want to connect. The required access rights are already configured. And what I have seen here, let's see what happens today. Yeah, couldn't start Windows Admin Center. So if this is the issue you are talking about, this is exactly what I also have seen on my new deployments. I didn't read through the complete list of known issues, if this maybe is already a known issue or if this is a new thing, but this is a physical machine. Yeah, okay. Nadim says this is exactly this. As you have seen in the previous page, this was a physical deployment on a physical machine, so this is not related to nested. So I have this Windows Admin Centers thing on my nested on my physical machine deployments. So what I'm doing here as a workaround, I am using a locally installed Windows Admin Center. So I have a Windows Admin Center in my environment I've locally installed where I'm connecting to this Azure Stack HCI here.
Wonderful. There's one more question. This one is for me, but I hand it over to you because I have no idea. So what is the reason for the long delays for updated images with up-to-date patches updates, so operating system, Office 365, and so on, to appear for Azure Stack HCI images?
Yeah, I don't know. So maybe a question we should give back to the corp team at Microsoft. So you need somebody to create these images. When we go to the VM images and we look at the options, we can also use images from a local share. So then I can create my own images. So I'm the person that is responsible to install the VM, to install the updates, to sysprep the VM and upload it here. My expectation is also, if I use the Azure Marketplace, that I always have an up-to-date image there. So something that is maybe maximum 2 weeks old, so that I have the latest version, the latest updates. As Robert says, this is not the case. I don't have an answer for it, so I don't know, but my assumption is that you need a person that does it, and if you don't have the person, then the image is not updated.
That's good.
So for the marketplaces images, we need the person at Microsoft. So we need somebody that has a workflow, an automated workflow. This would also be possible, or somebody that says this new image is published. For sure, you need some testing. It's not only providing this image, you have to test the image and so on. This is all part of the responsibility or part of the reason why it takes some time. But I don't know any document that says if a new version is released that is related to the Azure Marketplace images, we will publish this image within 2, 4, or 6 weeks. Sometimes it feels it takes longer, and sometimes it feels it is faster. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Good.
And
so any
Robert
more
says,
updates on the ARC extensions?
I assume there are many small things. Maybe I did not remember exactly that they are new. So these were the most important things I wanted to highlight there.
Okay. So we are switching to the upgrade.
Yeah, we can switch to the upgrade. And since a few weeks, we have a new section here in the documentation about upgrade and explanation how this works. And I think the first important thing is here, this graphic that describes that Azure Stack HCI consists of a lot of components, because this is important to understand the concept of the upgrade, how it works, and which part of the upgrade is related to your environment. Because one important part is the operating system. This is the thing where the customers that are thinking about upgrade currently have installed 22H2. So they have installed 22H2. Let's see where I can put it here. And they want somehow to come to 23H2. So they want to move from this old operating system version to a new operating system version. When we think about Windows Server, this is a process that is well known since years. So we had the previous operating system version. We started this operating system. We have put in the installation media of the later version, and then we started the upgrade. Usually this works. Usually N-1 and N-2 in Windows Server 2025. This will be even N-4. So if the requirements are met by your environment, this will work. The interesting thing at Azure Stack HCI is that the operating system is the smallest part here. So much more is the services part. So when we look at the Lifecycle Manager and the Arc VMs and the agent extensions, and when we look at the Arc Resource Bridge, here in this area, we have the Azure Arc Resource Bridge. And this Azure Arc Resource Bridge does not exist on Azure Stack HCI 22H2. So this is new to 23H2. Now it's important to understand that the upgrade from 22H2 to 23H2, the first step is to upgrade the operating system. And it's possible to upgrade the Azure Stack HCI OS without having all the rest. So it's possible to migrate to the new Azure Stack HCI version without providing the resource bridge. So the first step is to move from the old OS to the new operating system. This is important to understand because in Azure Stack HCI, we have some support lifecycle statements. And in the past, the statement was that every customer that has Azure Stack HCI 22H2 stays supported till Microsoft offers an upgrade path for every customer. And Microsoft offered this upgrade path because Microsoft says every customer, nearly every customer, now can upgrade to this new operating system, but only to the new operating system, not fully convert to a full Azure Stack HCI 23H2 stack, but upgrade the operating system. Now, the interesting thing is Microsoft never promised that we get the full stack of Azure Stack HCI 23H2 for existing systems. But Microsoft promised that every customer will have an offer for an upgrade to stay supported. And this is exactly what happens. So this phase 1 here can done by every customer that is running Azure Stack HCI 22H2. You should not install this OS upgrade if you have a stretched cluster scenario. This is my recommendation currently. But important is to know that we now have 6 months. So this 6-month migration time frame now is starting, or it started 4 or 5 weeks ago. So you should not wait too long to upgrade. But if you have a stretched cluster, maybe you should wait some time till you upgrade. Yeah, and Udo has an important remark. Same here. I'm only talking about the OS. For sure, you are running this OS on some hardware, and you have to ask your hardware vendor if the hardware is certified, if it's tested, if your hardware vendor supports this, and which driver version you should use. Absolutely, yeah. So if you have an, let's say, standard Azure Stack HCI 22H2 deployment, then you can also think about this second step. In the second step, you will receive all these Azure Stack HCI 23 H2 extensions, like for example, the Arc Resource Bridge and the full Arc management. And if you finished with step 2, so if you are completely on 23H2 with the operating system and with the whole environment, then you have also the capabilities like Azure Virtual Desktop, for example. And here, from step 1 to 2, there are several showstoppers. So step 1 to 2, so let's see this, let's take purple here. In this purple color here, this line here, you cannot move from 1 to 2 and deploy the rest of the components if you have a stretched cluster. So this is not supported today, but there will be some information how this will work. To be able to move from 1 to 2 to also execute the post-OS upgrade tasks, you have to configure network ATC before. Network ATC is a great technology, but in my typical Azure Stack HCI 22H2 deployments, I did not configure network ATC because I didn't see the big advantages here. Because many deployments I did were 2-node deployments, and in a 2-node deployment, there are not so many steps to configure both servers identical. If I'm using PowerShell scripts, I run them on server 1 and server 2, and it's very, very easy. In larger environments, network ATC always was an advantage because, as you might know, with network ATC, we configure some intents, so something like a template that is put on the network configuration, and for sure, as more servers I have, as more advantages I take out of this. You can configure network ATC on an older Azure Stack HCI system that was configured without network ATC, but these are several manual steps. You can see this here, install and enable network ATC. What is also a showstopper to come from 1 to step 2 is if you are running Azure Kubernetes services. Azure Kubernetes services was fully supported on Azure Stack HCI 22H2. The Azure Arc Resource Bridge was not supported on 22H2. So if you have an Azure Arc Resource Bridge from the preview area, you have to uninstall it. But also if you have Azure Kubernetes services, you also have to uninstall it. Then you can migrate and finish the post-OS tasks, and then you can reinstall AKS. So as you can see, there are several manual steps depending on your existing configuration. So if you have an Azure Stack HCI cluster, 22H2, not stretched, no AKS, and network ATC already configured, then it's very easy. If you have some of the showstoppers as service on it, then you have to fix this first.
There's one more ask. If 2408 supports private Arc for cluster deployments.
I don't know exactly what the question means for private Arc. Maybe I'm not up to date. So what is private Arc exactly?
I have no idea. That's why I'm asking you.
Maybe Alp, you can maybe I know this on a different name, or maybe I missed something. So maybe you can add this to your question. 24/8 support to private Arc. I don't know what private Arc is. So Azure Arc always is connected to Azure to give us the capability to manage via the Azure portal, to use functionalities from the Azure portal. Udo says maybe private endpoint. So there are some limitations for the private endpoints on this. What is new in the Arc thing is the Arc gateway. So to focus the connections towards Arc. So maybe I will add what exactly is meant with the private Arc. I mean, Azure private link. Sorry, I had a session with this about this with Eric 2 weeks ago, and as far as I know, he said that is not completely possible with private link, but I'm not completely sure about this.
But there's one question I receive very often these days, that the upgrade path from the last version to the current version took very long. Now we see that it's not super easy. You have a lot of things to do. And especially our system integrators ask me if the upgrade process is so complicated, then it takes a lot of time for them to do this at their customer sites, and time for them is losing money. If they have a services contract to do all the required upgrades, and upgrade takes so long, then it's not really something they are very happy with. So my understanding is that Azure Stack HCI at the moment is in a process of from an, let's say, old concept to a new concept, and a lot of technology changes are happening these days, and these are causing the issues we are facing right now. But with the next version of Azure Stack HCI 24 H2, or what the name will be, I think we are at a status of Azure Stack HCI where we can say, as far we can know right now, in future the upgrades will be easy as expected.
Yeah.
And this is a one-time situation we have. Do you
agree? This is also, yeah, absolutely. This is also what I expect. I don't know, but my expectation is that the next upgrade, so from 23H2 to the next version, will be much easier and uncomplicated like it was in the past. Yeah, as you mentioned, there are so many new things in 23H2, so that this is the reason why it's not so easy. So my recommendation is I wouldn't use this upgrade path, because Microsoft says AKS has to be removed because it's very easy to reinstall it and to redeploy everything. And it's similar to VMs. If I have virtual machines, I can back up these virtual machines, can redeploy my cluster, and I can restore the virtual machines. The possible showstopper is that my virtual machine data volume is much higher, because a container usually is very small. A virtual machine has some size. If it's a file server, it's usually very large. But I would always keep this option in mind, to think about the short downtime of a few hours or maybe a day. It depends on your size and your capacity. It's you have to calculate this. And maybe this is also a good step for some hardware refresh, where you could say, okay, I have the old cluster, let's take a new cluster, and then I can bring these machines with nearly no downtime or without any downtime to the new cluster, to the new hardware, depending on the specific configuration. And so I would take this as the last option, really, to upgrade on the existing hardware, like I described this in the last part.
Yeah, and so when we look back in the history of Azure Stack HCI, so at the beginning, Azure Stack HCI was a solution you deployed in your data center, for example, and then you had a lot of configuration options, and then you connected it to the Azure portal and everything was ready. But we had, for example, 10 customers with 10 different kinds of deployment. Customer A choose option one, customer B choose another option. And now we see that upgrading these completely different versions is running in customers into issues. And the idea of Azure Stack HCI, or the strategy of Azure Stack HCI, is very much focusing on edge computing, on retail manufacturing and things like that. So we are talking about customer scenarios where we have hundreds or thousands of sites. And it's absolutely important, if you have thousands of sites, that you do not have to touch every single system, or that you are not running into issues because hundreds of these sites have been deployed different than hundreds of the other sites. So the current strategy of Azure Stack HCI is that you deploy Azure Stack HCI following best practices from the Azure portal. It's not so flexible as it was in the past, but with less flexibility, we get more stability, and it's easier to forecast what could happen when there's an upgrade. Of course, you have some maybe some things that are related to hardware configurations, but from the software perspective, it's easier for Microsoft to plan upgrade path. That's why I'm very confident that in future it will be much, much easier. And this is exactly what our customers expect from us.
Yep.
And I'm curious about the next Ignite in November.
Mm-hmm.
Because with the Ignite, there will be some updates on Windows Server announcements, Azure Stack HCI announcements. So this is what we heard these days, that it will be really a part of the Ignite. So in the past, Ignite has a lot of topics like AI and so on. And Azure Stack HCI was not really part of Ignite. So we used the Ignite timeframe for some announcements, but it was not part of that. The same for Windows Server. But if it's really true that these two products will be in the agenda of Azure, of the Ignite, it demonstrates that the hybrid solutions Microsoft is offering, and I include Windows Server and Arc and Azure Stack HCI, become more important. And I think this is very true because of the VMware situations. So a lot of customers reach out to Microsoft and say, we count on you, we need you to do this and that. And it's getting more and more a product that you can rely on.
The interesting thing about this is the Ignite agenda is not online yet, but
No.
I just registered for Ignite, and what's already possible is to book the pre-day. And in the pre-day are exactly 3 sessions in the area you mentioned. There's a Windows Server 2025 session, something about Windows Server management. I don't remember it exactly. There's another pre-day session about Azure Arc. So I didn't find any information if it's Azure Stack HCI related. It's just hybrid management. And then is one session about workloads at the edge. It's related to IoT. There was no Azure Stack HCI in the naming there, but my understanding was that this is related to Azure Stack HCI because as far as I know, this is our platform for containers and things like this. So this confirms exactly what you mentioned, Sven. So let's see what in the agenda will be, in the official agenda. I don't know when this will be published. Currently, it's not online, but the pre-days are already very, very interesting. So they sound like there will be more about these technology areas.
So looking forward to that, and looking forward to our next Azure Stack HCI show, because we are already over time for today. So let's close the session as always with some information about what you can get over the next couple of weeks. So for example, in 2 weeks, we are back with the Azure Stack HCI show. We do not know the topic so far, but I think there will be some new updates over the next 2 weeks. And I want to highlight my website, svenlangenfeld-techtalk.com. There's everything included I have so far about Azure Stack HCI, content, news, relevant links. And Udo Walberer mentioned today very often that it makes sense to get in contact with your OEM, because they have all the detailed information about the operating system and the hardware. And when you're looking for your contact of your OEM, then it makes sense to go on my website to the hardware services. And when you go to the hardware services, you can see most of the OEMs with certified hardware, and you can see who are the people at the OEM who can support you. So for example, here at Lenovo, we have Udo Walberer, and you have contact information. So if you do not know who's your Azure Stack HCI go-to person at the OEM, on my website, you will find this information. And of course, it makes sense to follow us on LinkedIn, on YouTube, but especially on LinkedIn. There's an Azure Stack HCI Tech Talk channel, and in this channel, Manfred, I, and other experts are posting news about Azure Stack HCI. So if you go on LinkedIn and search for Azure Stack HCI Tech Talk, please follow us and stay up to date. And there's a hybrid show every second Friday before the Azure Stack HCI show. So 2 hours earlier, the MVPs Eric Berg and Manfred Helber are talking about hybrid solutions. And in one of the last shows, they had a 1-hour deep dive into the upgrade path. So maybe if you want to learn a little bit more and see some demos in this hybrid show, this has been done some weeks ago, and it's available through Manfred Helber's YouTube channel. So if you go to YouTube channel, search for Manfred Helber, there it is. The Azure Arc Show is a show between Manfred Helber and Alexander Orta. My colleague Alexander is an expert of Azure Arc, and they will have their show next Monday. It's available through Manfred Helber's YouTube channel as well. It's in the morning, 11 a.m. German time, and they will share some Azure Arc news. And of course, if you do not want to miss the things Manfred and I are doing, there's one option to go on manfredhelber.de/calendar. There is an option to download the calendar or to have an abo for the calendar, and you do not miss the things we are doing. Another option is to go on manfredhelber.de/newsletter, and then you can subscribe to a newsletter Manfred is sending once or twice a week with relevant new events, webcasts, and things like that. So looking forward to see you in 2 weeks. So we are 8 minutes over time. I say goodbye, and I wish you a very nice weekend. And the last words, as always, for Manfred.
Yeah, have a nice weekend and see you in 2 weeks. Bye.
Bye-bye.